Welcome back to another deep dive. It's really great to have you sitting down with us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always good to be here.
We generally treat these sessions like a strategy catch-up, and today you and I are going to be dissecting something that carries just enormous financial stakes if you operate anywhere near the government contracting space.
Oh, absolutely. The stakes are massive right now.
Right. We're looking at the big regulatory shifts rolling out for GovCons following the passage of the FY 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA.
Right. The landscape is fundamentally changing. I mean, for the companies navigating this shift, the difference between long-term success and a catastrophic audit finding,
Yeah.
it really comes down to the architecture of their accounting systems.
Yes.
And how well they anticipate these new rules.
Exactly. So our source material today is this highly detailed excerpt. It's titled Scaling to Full CAS Coverage in 2026, Automating the $100 Transition. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack exactly what this 2026 legislation dictates for the industry. We're going to demystify the really daunting leap from modified CAS coverage to full CAS coverage.
Which is a huge leap.
It is. And crucially, we're going to explore how a specialized solution, specifically Daston's DCAA on-demand suite app for NetSuite,
Right.
how that acts as a critical lifeline for companies navigating this specific transition.
Yeah, it's a vital tool.
So if you're out there analyzing GovCon compliance trends, or maybe prepping for a board discussion on infrastructure scaling, or just tracking how billion-dollar industries adapt to regulatory pressure, you are in the right place.
Definitely.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the biggest structural change in the 2026 NDA.
So the focal point of the legislation is the threshold adjustment. Historically, the trigger for full CAS coverage sat at $50 million in net CAS covered awards.
Right.
Well, the 2026 NDAA has doubled that, up to $100 million.
Wow.
Yeah. Furthermore, the trigger for applicability at the individual contract level has seen a significant jump too, moving from $2.5 million all the way up to $35 million.
I mean, doubling the main threshold and multiplying the individual contract trigger by a factor of 14, that completely changes the trajectory for growing firms.
It changes everything.
The strategy behind this legislation is essentially to provide some much-needed breathing room for mid-tier contractors, right?
Exactly. The defense sector relies heavily on mid-tier innovation. But transitioning to full CAS coverage is an incredibly heavy administrative burden that historically just, stifled growth.
Yeah, it was a ceiling.
Right. By raising the threshold to $100 million, the government is extending the runway. Growing companies can take on larger prime contracts, scale their operations, and invest in their infrastructure without immediately being crushed by the highest tier of regulatory compliance.
And here's the catch from the source text.
What's fascinating here is the hidden trap within that extended runway.
Yeah.
It sounds like a pure benefit, right? Grow to $100 million before the heavy rules kick in.
Sounds great on paper.
Right. But the source material highlights a highly complex mixed bag scenario. The rule is that a contract awarded under modified coverage retains that modified status for its entire life cycle.
Right. And that is where the friction starts.
Oh, major friction.
Let's say a firm wins a $20 million contract today under modified coverage. 3 years from now, thanks to strong growth, their net CAS covered awards cross that $100 million threshold.
Yep, they crossed the line.
That triggers full CAS coverage for the business entity. So every new contract they sign is subject to full CAS. However,
that original $20 million contract doesn't upgrade.
Exactly. It continues operating under the original modified rules until it closes out. So the accounting department is now forced to manage two completely different regulatory frameworks simultaneously.
Within the same general ledger.
It sounds like a nightmare.
Managing that mixed bag is a primary source of audit findings, and it's easy to see why. You're attempting to run a hybrid compliance model, allocating indirect costs differently depending on the specific vintage and terms of individual contracts that are sharing the exact same overhead pool.
And if they try to do this the old way?
Yeah, if a firm tries to manage this manually, relying on linked spreadsheets to track which project requires which level of compliance, the system eventually breaks.
It has to.
It absolutely does. Formulas degrade, human error enters the data entry process, and the moment an auditor pulls a thread, the inconsistencies become glaringly obvious.
Which brings us to what the source calls the complexity cliff. We're talking about the jump from modified to full coverage, so let's examine what that leap actually entails.
Sure.
Modified CAS coverage, which is typically the starting point for firms securing their first large negotiated contracts, requires compliance with just 4 standards.
Right. CAS 401, 402, 405, and 406.
Right. It's serious business, but it's a known, manageable framework focused on consistency and accounting for unallowable costs.
The transition to full CAS, however, triggers compliance with 19 standards.
19.
Yeah. This isn't just a matter of generating a few extra reports for the government. It requires fundamentally restructuring how a company handles everything from pension costs to depreciation.
And the source material specifically points to CIS 410 and CIS 418 as major operational hurdles.
Definitely. Under modified coverage, contractors have a degree of flexibility in their allocation basis.
Right.
But under full CAS, 410 and 418 mandate the strict, precise allocation of G&A and other indirect costs. The legislation explicitly requires that this allocation must be based on a beneficial or causal relationship.
So you can no longer rely on just simplified, broad brush allocations.
Exactly. To satisfy that beneficial or causal requirement, a firm has to mathematically demonstrate that a specific indirect pool directly benefited a specific cost objective.
Or that the contract physically caused that cost to be incurred.
Right. Achieving this requires a highly sophisticated, multi-tiered allocation logic. If an accounting team attempts to just peanut butter spread shared IT expenses or facility costs across all active projects just to simplify the month-end close,
The DCAA will immediately reject the methodology.
without a doubt.
Another major hurdle introduced at this stage is CAS 414, the cost of money. We'll get into how to successfully manage that in a moment, but just the sudden requirement to account for the theoretical cost of capital tied up in your facilities adds a massive layer of complexity.
It really does. But the element in the source material that carries the highest immediate risk is the CASB DS-1.
The disclosure statement.
Right. The DS-1 is effectively a company's financial constitution. It is a formal, highly detailed document submitted to the government outlining every single accounting practice and policy the firm intends to use.
And the stakes here are binary.
Fully binary. If a company's ERP system execution deviates even slightly from the methodology document in the DS-1, the government imposes severe cost impact penalties.
So let's say the DS-1 states that facility costs are allocated based on square footage, but the legacy software system can only allocate based on headcount.
Right. When the DCAA identifies that disconnect between the stated policy and the system's actual mathematical execution, they calculate the difference and penalize the contractor.
Wow.
The necessity for an accounting system that perfectly mirrors the firm's compliance obligations is absolute at the full CAS level.
And this is the exact intersection where many mid-tier contractors panic.
Oh, they panic hard.
They recognize they're approaching the $100 million threshold. They realize their current setup cannot handle the 19 standards or that mixed bag life cycle we talked about.
Okay.
And the immediate assumption is that they must rip out their entire ERP and implement a massive, archaic, legacy GovCon software suite, which is a highly disruptive, high-risk maneuver.
It's the worst-case scenario for an IT department.
Which brings us to the core focus of the sources and how companies are actually bridging this gap. The material highlights Daston, identifying them as the industry-recognized NetSuite experts for DCAA and GovCon accounting. Their approach fundamentally challenges that rip and replace assumption.
It does. Daston built the DCAA On-Demand Suite app to act as a compliance bridge. It allows government contractors to scale up to that $100 million full CAS environment while remaining on the modern cloud infrastructure of NetSuite.
So they add a specialized compliance engine without abandoning their existing operational core.
Exactly. The architecture of that bridge is what makes it effective. Let's look at the 3 core automations this Suite app provides, starting with automated indirect cost allocation.
Right. We discussed the strict beneficial or causal logic required by CIS 410 and 418.
Yeah, Daston's module handles this multi-tier allocation logic natively. It covers the requirements for CAS 403, 410, and 418 simultaneously.
The source notes that this module is flexible enough to handle different approved methods, too.
Right, so whether a contractor's DS-1 utilizes a total cost input base, or maybe they carve out subcontracts and materials to run on a value-added base, the software accommodates the specific methodology.
And the critical capability here is that the system calculates actual, provisional, and target rates in real time.
That real-time visibility changes the entire financial management dynamic. Instead of waiting for a massive batch process at the end of the month to discover variance issues, the finance team can monitor rate performance continuously within NetSuite.
They can see exactly how costs are pooling and allocating day by day.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the second core automation, which tackles CAS 414, the cost of money.
Yes.
The source explicitly calls calculating facilities' capital cost of money a manual nightmare for most organizations.
Because it is.
Right. But Daston automates this entirely within NetSuite. And the outcome is that it transforms a complex compliance liability into an allowable profit-like cost that is accurately recovered on every invoice.
That is huge. The concept behind cost of money is the government acknowledging that by investing capital in facilities and equipment to perform defense work, the contractor is tying up funds that could have generated returns elsewhere.
Right.
The firm is entitled to recover a portion of that theoretical cost. However, the mathematics required to prove the capital investment, allocate it to the correct pools, and bill for it across multiple contracts are incredibly tedious.
And because of that friction, many firms simply leave that money on the table.
They do, all the time.
It's just too difficult to calculate reliably outside of the core system without triggering an audit finding.
Right. By automating the CAS 414 calculations directly within the ERP, Daston ensures contractors are systematically recovering revenue they are legally entitled to.
It eliminates the administrative friction and drops that recovered cost directly to the bottom line.
Exactly. Now, the third core automation focuses on real-time labor distribution.
Which ties back to the consistency requirements established early on in CAS 401.
Right. For any GovCon, labor is typically the largest expense category. And consequently, it's the most heavily scrutinized area during an audit.
Oh, absolutely.
Daston's payroll cost allocation module ensures that labor is fully burdened, meaning all associated fringe benefits, overhead, and G&A are applied and distributed to the correct cost objectives instantly.
The critical phrase in the source material regarding this module is that it provides a 100% audit trail. The system ensures that the general ledger perfectly matches the employee time cards.
Which is harder than it sounds.
Think about the administrative complexity of an engineer splitting their Friday afternoon between a commercial aerospace project and a defense contract.
Right.
The overhead and fringe rates applied to those distinct hours must be flawless.
Flawless. And Daston maps that distribution directly to the GL, leaving no daylight between the timesheet entry and the financial statements.
That absolute traceability is the definitive defense against cost impact penalties.
It really is. When an auditor selects a random time card from 8 months prior, the firm can trace that exact hour of labor, fully burdened with the precise indirect rates active at that specific time, all the way through the system to the final invoice submitted to the government.
That is the standard of proof required to pass a modern DCAA audit.
Exactly.
And speaking of audits, we need to address the final segment of our analysis today, which revolves around surviving the 12-month audit sprint.
Yes.
The source material introduces a critical ticking clock regarding the current regulatory environment. The DCAA has fundamentally shifted its operational cadence and is now aiming to close incurred cost audits within 12 months.
This is a major departure from historical norms. Previously, contractors would submit their incurred cost proposals and then endure a holding pattern that could last 5 or 6 years before the DCAA initiated the audit.
6 years?
Yeah. It created a massive backlog and cast a long shadow of financial uncertainty over the industry.
Because if a firm made a systemic allocation error 5 years ago and the audit is only happening now, the compound penalties across half a decade of invoices could be devastating.
Bankrupting in some cases.
Right. But with the DCAA pushing for a 12-month turnaround, speed and accuracy are no longer optional capabilities for a contractor.
Not at all.
You cannot spend 3 months internally untangling linked spreadsheets to answer an auditor's preliminary data request. The system has to be ready to generate the required reports immediately.
And this compressed timeline synthesizes exactly why Daston stands apart as the strategic choice for the 2026 landscape. The source material breaks down their advantage into 3 distinct pillars.
Let's go through.
The first is that the Suite app is built for NetSuite. It is native to the platform.
Right, so it is not a bolt-on application that sits outside the ERP perimeter.
Exactly. Whenever a firm relies on external software requiring API connections or batch data syncing to push information back and forth to the general ledger, they introduce the risk of data corruption, mapping errors, or timing differences.
Which auditors love to find.
Oh, they zero right in on it.
Yeah.
By engineering the compliance engine directly inside NetSuite, Daston eliminates that structural risk. The compliance data and the financial data are pulling from the exact same unified source.
That makes sense.
The second pillar is that it is audit-ready by design. And the development background of the Suite app is crucial here.
Right. It was engineered by former DCAA auditors and GovCon chief financial officers.
Yes, they possess an intimate understanding of the why behind the regulations, not just the technical specifications.
They've sat on both sides of the table.
Exactly. They know where manual processes fail, how hybrid contract life cycles create audit traps, and exactly what specific reports an auditor will request during the entrance conference.
So they architected the system to automatically generate the precise evidentiary formats the DCAA expects to see, minimizing back-and-forth inquiries.
Right. And the third pillar is that the system is future-proof. As demonstrated by the 2026 NDAA, the legislative environment is dynamic. Thresholds shift from 50 million to 100 million. Contract applicability triggers jump.
And when those legislative thresholds inevitably change again, Daston updates the Suite app logic automatically.
Automatically. The internal accounting team doesn't have to monitor congressional subcommittees, interpret the new statutes, and manually reconfigure the ERP's allocation logic to maintain compliance.
The software adapts to the prevailing regulatory environment on behalf of the contractor.
Exactly.
Which is huge. Imagine the relief of having an accounting system that is ready for the audit before the auditor even knocks on the door. I mean, reaching a $100 million portfolio should be a celebrated milestone for a business.
It really should. It signifies serious market traction and operational maturity.
Right. It shouldn't be overshadowed by the anxiety of a looming regulatory hurdle that threatens to derail the finance team.
And that encapsulates the core value proposition. It elevates compliance from a reactive, high-stress exercise into a proactive, automated component of the daily operational workflow.
So to summarize our analysis of the source material today,
Okay.
the 2026 NDAA is significantly reshaping the GovCon landscape. By doubling the CAS threshold to $100 million, the legislation gives mid-tier contractors vital runway to scale their operations. However, that growth introduces the treacherous leap from the 4 standards of modified CAS to the 19 standards of full CAS. And because of the mixed bag rules governing older contracts, attempting to manage this transition with manual accounting methods is practically guaranteed to trigger costly audit findings.
Guaranteed.
So leveraging specialized solutions like Daston and their native DCAA on-demand Suite app for NetSuite isn't merely an administrative upgrade. In an era defined by 12-month DCAA audit sprints, it is a strategic necessity to protect margins and survive the transition.
It is. And it raises an important question. If crossing the $100 million threshold requires a perfectly automated, flawlessly mapped digital ecosystem just to satisfy government auditors, what does this tell us about the hidden costs of scaling? In the future of government contracting, are the ultimate winners going to be the companies with the best physical products and services, or simply the ones who can build the most adaptable compliance algorithms?
That is an incredibly sharp point to end on, and it frames the true competitive battlefield for these growing firms. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today.
My pleasure.
We hope this breakdown provided the strategic clarity you need to navigate the incoming regulatory shifts and evaluate your own infrastructure. Keep analyzing the data, keep questioning the mechanics of the systems around you, and we will see you on the next one.